On this edition of the program, the rise of cheap fakes and the debut of our vice presidential nomination power poll, Tom LoBianco, back on the show. It's all coming up. Hello and welcome everybody to the Politics program for June 19th, 2024. Your old pal Justin Robert Young joining you from Austin, Texas. Biden 2024 is mad that Joe Biden looks like he's 2024 years old. Or at least that's what you'd believe if you're looking at malicious online videos, insidiously known as cheap fakes. You've seen them. It's Joe Biden wandering off from the other G7 leaders at the summit last week, having to be pulled back by Giorgia Meloni. Or seemingly freezing while listening to music during the White House's Juneteenth celebration. And then just this weekend being escorted off stage by Barack Obama at an LA fundraiser. They're misleading. They're weirdly edited. They're cheap fakes.
And I think you all have called this the cheap fakes video, and that's exactly what they are. They are cheap fakes video. They are done in bad faith.
Cheap fakes, right from the mouth of Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary. This term surprised me because I'm a politically obsessed internet miscreant and I'd never heard the term cheap fakes before. Thankfully, articles in the Washington Post and NBC News explained it to me. While deep fakes, NBC News writes, are misleading audio, video, or images that are created or edited with artificial intelligence technologies, a cheap fake, according to researchers Britt Paris and Joan Donovan, is a manipulation created with cheaper, more accessible software or none at all. Cheap fakes can be rendered through Photoshop, lookalikes, recontextualizing footage, speeding, or slowing. Pictures and videos selectively cropped and edited, sped up and slowed down, put with ominous music and grayscale. Oh, so all political videos. Thanks to our YouTube channel, we've recently gotten a lot of new eyeballs on this program. So let me explain something that is a core tenet of the Politics program. We are not here to propagandize for one campaign or the other. There's a lot of people that do that on YouTube or on the podcast directory that you're listening to right now, and they do a fantastic job. May their favorite team win and everybody have fun. What I want to do is provide a service that tells you whether or not the propaganda that your side is putting out is working. They are all attempting to shape the narrative, and my hope is that with wit and insight, I can tell you whether or not that's effective. So let's get to something core about messaging and specifically shaping a narrative. You can't shape a narrative that doesn't want to be shaped. The best political communicators understand there's a wellspring of energy somewhere and they create a totem to take advantage of it. Are you tired of foreign wars? Well, maybe you want hope. Do you believe that you're not getting the America that you were promised? Then maybe we should make it great again. Videos of Joe Biden looking like a doddering elder are not going viral because Cat Turd 2 posts them on Elon Musk's Twitter. They are not shaping the national conversation because the New York Post puts it on their cover. They are doing so because a large enough section of America believes Joe Biden is very old and they are interested in seeing visual evidence that confirms their intuitions. The Democrats can't do anything about how old Joe Biden is. And so, his re-election campaign complaining about these videos and elevating a lame techno-babble label for it only draws attention to something that hurts them and they have no answer for. For our younger viewers, this is called the Streisand effect. It's named after the singer and actress Barbra Streisand. There was a picture of her house on the internet and she wanted it taken off. The fight over that picture wound up drawing infinitely more attention to her address and pictures of her house than ever would have happened if she had just sat down and shut up about it. Or if you want a more recent example, you can look at Barbara Streisand drawing attention to this issue on her Twitter last night. I gotta say, this was actually pretty cool. It was like watching Dr. Heimlich remove a blockage from somebody's throat in real time. Salute to you, Babs. Beyond tremendous self-destruction, getting into a fight about politically edited videos is somewhere between hypocritical and pointless. Every campaign does it. Every surrogate to a campaign probably does it worse. Here's an example. This is one of Joe Biden's final ads for his 2020 campaign.
Hatred on the streets of Charlottesville last night. White nationalists carrying torches.
It was a weekend of street battles and stark displays of racism.
But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides.
We are in a battle for the soul.
Okay, let's stop here. That Donald Trump soundbite, very fine people on both sides, was not just a clip in that commercial. It was a major theme for Joe Biden's entire campaign. In fact, in his debut video, he said it was the reason why he was running. So let's take a look at the full clip of Donald Trump giving that press conference where that specific soundbite came from.
Neo-Nazis started this. They showed up in Charlottesville. They showed up in Charlottesville to protest.
Excuse me, they didn't put themselves down as neo, and you had some very bad people in that group. But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group, excuse me, I saw the same pictures as you did. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name. No, George Washington was a slave owner.
Okay, we're going to skip ahead a few seconds in this because Donald Trump rambles.
You had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. But you had many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists, okay?
Obviously, the very fine people clip is diluted when you add Donald Trump very clearly denouncing neo-Nazis and white supremacists. Does it make the use of that soundbite a cheap fake because you've selectively edited a clip to make your opponent look like an outwardly terrible person? No! Is it unfair? Is it undignified? I don't know. Go to your partisan programs where those kinds of things matter. Here, we're in the business of wondering who wins. And part of the reason that Joe Biden won is because stuff like that stuck to Trump. Why? Because Donald Trump was a chaotic outsider and people were concerned about what that chaos would lead into the government. For never-Trumpers, it was an erosion of norms. For Democrats, it was literal anti-Semites and Nazis. Political speech isn't fair. It's meant to persuade. It's meant to get more people into a booth to hit your candidate's button than your opponent's button on a predetermined day. For Biden 2024, every second they spend talking to a journalist or answering questions about a persuasive viral video that hurts their cause, they are not elevating a persuasive viral video that can elevate their cause. Yeah, Biden's old. Steer into the skid. Hand out Werther's Originals to all the press corps when they walk in. Make a video about Joe Biden writing a $10 check to his grandchild. And then say, look, I'm old as dirt, but I'm old enough to remember when the Supreme Court was balanced. I'm old enough to remember when abortion didn't divide us in the way that we are divided now. I'm here to answer for all of those. I'm giving you a reason to vote in November for Joe Biden, even though you have reservations about my age. Or you can elevate the video where it looks like Joe Biden is pooping his pants. I mean, what do I know? Biden 2024, you guys are the professionals. I'm just a barking dog on the internet. This is your update brought to you by TakePoliticsSeriously.com, where you can support this show, get bonus episodes, and more. But this is a Joe Biden ad he's spending $50 million on.
In the courtroom, we see Donald Trump for who he is. He's been convicted of 34 felonies, found liable for sexual assault, and he committed financial fraud. Meanwhile, Joe Biden's been working, lowering health care costs and making big corporations pay their fair share. This election is between a convicted criminal who's only out for himself and a president who's fighting for your family.
I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message.
This is the first campaign communication for Biden 2024 that goes after Donald Trump for his convictions. They have had a hot and cold relationship with how to deal with it. They did not make a big deal about the case while it was going on until the last day of the trial when they sent Robert De Niro and a bunch of January 6th police officers to go speak in front of the courtroom. Then the Biden campaign and White House decided that they would not wallow in that news, instead announcing not one but two major initiatives to shift the news onto Joe Biden. And now we're back to talking about Donald Trump being a convicted criminal, which is interesting because I thought convicted felon sounds worse than criminal to me. That's what everybody was saying before, but they went with convicted criminal. Politico talked to a bunch of people involved with their strategy, and this is what they came back with. President Joe Biden's campaign initially avoided talking about Donald Trump's convictions, but internal polling and focus groups showed the verdict alienated voters, leading to a strategic shift. On Monday, Biden's campaign launched a sharp attack ad portraying Trump as a convicted criminal who's only out for himself. Biden's advisors plan to emphasize Trump's conviction leading up to his first debate, aiming to keep the felony in voters' minds. This approach marks a significant change from the immediate post-verdict period when Biden's team downplayed the conviction's potential impact. The campaign's new strategy is part of a $50 million ad buy in battleground states, framing the election as a character contrast between Biden and Trump. That will be in all swing states, and this is all television in June. So they're putting this thing up for $50 million over the next 2 weeks. Public polls have shown slight movement for Biden since the verdict, but the more polls that come out show that there's not really much movement, at least since then, which is partially why I think they're putting this out there, just to make sure that people don't forget about it. Biden's campaign intends to keep highlighting Trump's conviction despite initial reservations. Ultimately, look, we had Ed Germentum on the show last Friday, and his point was this changes if he goes to jail. I would agree that should Donald Trump get sentenced to jail, then we're going to see some kind of change. The question is whether or not, as Josh thought, it turns off essentially the entire electorate because people throw up their hands with this Trump character, or if there's a rallying around the flag for the base, Mitt Romney puts on a MAGA hat, and now independents are more likely to look at the push for saving democracy as hypocritical for Biden. Which, by the way, this is a swing state poll, meaning that they have surveyed people from all of the swing states to see what they mean. I kind of have come to hate these types of polls because each of these states are very different. I don't know what the average Nevada voter has to do with the average Pennsylvania voter, but still, this is a poll that was showcased in the Washington Post. It is swing state voters deciding on which candidate between Trump and Biden would handle each issue better. Some of the stuff we know, obviously, Trump is favored on the economy. 43% believe that he would handle it better to Biden's 21%. Immigration, Donald Trump, massive lead, 49 to 21. But I want you to look at threats to democracy. That is 38% of swing state voters believe that Donald Trump would be better on the issue of threats to democracy in the United States. Only 29% of Biden voters believe that he would be the best at that. That's crazy to me, because the Biden campaign has spent a ton of time and effort on that, and it's not his top issue. It's not as big as racism, which has 35% of voters that say he's the best to handle that. Abortion is at 36%. Climate change is at 35%. I don't know. That to me would be a scary number. I would look at, in terms of these kinds of issues, Joe Biden needs to be leading on democracy and abortion, considering the amount of time and money that he spent on them. The House Ethics Committee has announced that it will further review allegations against Representative Matt Gaetz of Florida, including sexual misconduct, illicit drug use, and accepting improper gifts. The committee has accused Gaetz of being uncooperative and reported difficulty in obtaining relevant information. Gaetz has been under investigation since April 2021, spurred by DOJ reports of a relationship with him and an underage girl, though the DOJ declined to charge him in 2023 when it came to those allegations. The committee's statement emphasized that the allegations warrant continued review and noted additional accusations. Gaetz denies all of these and criticized the committee, blaming former Speaker Kevin McCarthy for the ongoing entanglement. The committee clarified that it's no longer reviewing certain other allegations against Gaetz, including bribery. We're about to get into our conversation with the one and only Tom LoBianco, wherein there's a wondering of, by the way, we have not mentioned Matt Gaetz. You have to wonder if this is partly why. Matt Gaetz wants this stuff to be in his past, officially in his past, before he starts stepping out more than within the congressional sphere. And finally, President Joe Biden has announced an executive action to shield certain undocumented spouses of U.S. citizens from deportation and allowing them to work in the United States while seeking citizenship. The policy uses parole in place and will apply to those who have lived in the United States for 10 years. The move, sought by immigration advocates and Democrats, comes after Biden's recent restrictive asylum measures at the southern border. It could be the largest relief program since Obama's DACA, allowing undocumented immigrants who came as children to live and work in the United States. Biden will mark DACA's anniversary on Tuesday and introduce work visas for eligible DACA recipients. These steps could impact hundreds of thousands of Americans. Democrats in battleground states have found these moves encouraging. Well, also, Joe Biden has a coalitional problem when it comes to immigration. And if you wonder why some of the immigration reform Democrats did not absolutely crack Biden in the head, you saw some grousing in the press, but you didn't see gigantic press conferences saying that Joe Biden was Hitler. And I'm suspecting this was the deal from the beginning. You don't have to like what was happening on the border, but Joe Biden has to do something on the border to save the Senate, to save his presidency. Don't worry. Wait 2 weeks and we'll do something, as opposed to making everything one move. Instead of saying we are going to do a border thing, but we're also going to do this thing in one, they decided to split it up to get the attention on either. I don't hate the move, to be totally honest with you. I think that it's probably better to do that. The only cognitive dissonance is that in his speech, Joe Biden made a point to say that he's not playing politics with the border. Well, pretty explicitly playing politics with the border. I mean, come on. What else are you going to call this? But we love it. I mean, we love politics so much we named the show that name 3 times. So, we're sickos like that. Take politics seriously. .com is where you need to go to support this show. It is our Patreon account. At the $3 level, you get 2 bonus episodes each and every week. One on Monday, one on Thursday, filling in all the missing little tidbits that pop up in between our free podcasting schedule. They're on video too. You know, so if you are one of our new YouTube viewers and you want to get those bonus episodes, they happen on video and you get them exclusively on Patreon. TakePoliticsSeriously.com. And now the great Tom LoBianco. The Veepstakes is in full swing, which means that we have to bring on Tom LoBianco. 24 Site is where you read his work. How you doing, Tom?
Justin, what's up, baby?
I want to start a regular thing until we have a vice president where we make a little poll of the PX3 power poll of vice presidential selections at this moment, right? Not that it's going to happen, but at this moment where we're at, some will be consistent, some are going to move. We'll do a top 10, but before we do that, there's only one reason why we're going to have any leeway to do it, and it's because apparently Donald Trump does not want to name a vice president until the convention. I would imagine that what he wants to do is the greatest live finale of The Apprentice ever. I don't know if he's going to force them all to get on stage without knowing who the vice president's going to be and then have them step forward when he names them. But that's what he wants to do, which means we have a little bit of time between now and then. I texted you to see whether or not you believe that that's the case, or if we're just going to get a text message tomorrow naming the vice president. You said absolutely, and you've got evidence why. What is that?
Yes. I mean, this is his second time doing this. We have predicate for this, which is 2016. All right. I mean, if you remember, and I wrote about this in my Pence bio, Piety and Power, that the way it all went down 8 years ago, and it is so strange to think that is 8 years ago now. Yeah. In like July of 2016, when there's that pivotal week, which really turned out to be quite historic, actually, among the many pivotal moments in that race. That week was right before the Republican convention in Cleveland, and it was it was down to three people: Chris Christie, Newt Gingrich, and Mike Pence. And Reince Priebus and Paul Manafort were pushing hard for Mike Pence. Nobody really. The Kushners, Javanka didn't want Christie because of the whole Charles Kushner prosecution thing.
As we later found out, the knives eventually hit Christie.
Yep. Gingrich was popular with Trump himself because he's very simpatico in how they talk about things. But as his campaign team at the time argued to him, which is correct, is that it's like there's already one pirate on the ship. You don't need another one.
Yes.
But they had to engineer Pence onto the ticket, and Pence's team really did an excellent job of pushing this. But back then, if you recall, he was announced on that Saturday before the Republican convention. First he was announced on Friday, that Friday before the convention, and then they did the press conference the next day. Yeah, and the reason why was this is very typical of the 2016 campaign and how different it is from the current campaign, the 24 campaign. I mean, 8 years is a lot of political learning for anybody, and they have evolved incredibly so in these 8 years. Pence's team had to force him to make the announcement before the convention because, number one, they didn't trust him, which turns out to be exactly the way to handle Donald Trump because he tells everybody yes. It's like, is it going to be Christie or Gingrich or Pence? And he's like, yes.
Yes is the answer. One of them.
It's like
I'm 100% on everybody, but specifically one of them.
It's like a Mayor Quimby or something, you know. But they had a very real deadline, and Pence's team, it was that you can only run for one office in Indiana to appear on the ballot. You have to either run for re-election as governor, or you would have to withdraw and then refile with the Secretary of State as a vice presidential candidate. And the hard deadline was the noon of that Friday before the convention.
So they were saying, look, either if you like us, you got to take us now, because otherwise we're going to run for something. And unless this is for sure, we're going to announce that we are running for a re-election.
Yep. And remember, too, at this time, nobody took, even though he was 95% already the Republican nominee. I mean, there was still that effort to undo it at the convention that year in Cleveland. Unbind the delegates. Delegates unbound.
Oh yeah, no, I was there. I remember having all the little whispers, and it's funny now. I saw Mike Lee, give the speech for Donald Trump at the Libertarian Convention, talking about what a great guy is. But Mike Lee was one of those unbound delegate guys that was running around whispering to everybody that this is the coup.
Yes, right. Based Mike Lee, as he, changed his whatever to the Twitter X. It was so like nobody expected Trump to win, and nobody was really taking it seriously. And I wrote about this in the Pence biography about how there's a moment, I think it was May of 2016, where and I remember this. I was sitting in the basement of the Capitol, grabbing senators and asking them, "Oh, hey, do you want to be a running mate? What do you think about all this?" I mean, the same thing we're doing right now, frankly, 8 years later, total repeat. And a lot of people are like, I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to get into it. People did not want to talk about Trump. He invited Bob Corker, the old Senate Foreign Relations chairman, to Trump Tower. And Corker's like, I don't want to be on the ticket with Trump. Yeah. I'm not just saying this just to be coy. Like, I actually don't want to be a vice presidential running mate. And they're like, well, just come up and just meet with him. That's the least you can do.
Yeah.
And he's like, all right, fine. So he goes up to New York, and he has 30-minute meeting with Trump. And at the end of the meeting, he politely tells him, he's like, Mr. Trump, I am not the right person for you. I wish you luck, but I will not accept this if you offer it. And towards the end of the meeting, Trump says, hey, I just want to let you know, there's a whole bunch of cameras downstairs waiting for you in the lobby. And Corker, being a normal politician, is like, oh, don't worry, I'm not going to say anything. And Trump's like, oh, no, you should say something.
I want you to.
Yeah. Tell them that I offered you the job and that you're going to be the running mate. And he's like, what? He's like, yeah, just tell them that. Just tell them you're the vice president.
It'll get the people going. It's provocative.
Yeah. And he did not do that. But that was like where,
which shows why he was not right for the job.
Yeah, right, exactly. So all of this is a long way of getting at number one. I mean, Trump is a showman, and this is the way that he likes to do things. He's a television guy. He's a reality television guy. He's a New Yorker at heart. And this is how you stage produce. This is how you break through.
This is how you break through a very, very busy media cycle. There's no way no one's going to turn on the television. And so the pros and cons, right? If you are the VP, then you are anchoring one of the nights of your conventions. There is only a few times where once every 4 years, our two major parties essentially command 2 hours, if not more, in our cable media ecosystem, sometimes 4 or 5 hours of unbroken attention. The entire news division is there. The entire politics division is there. Everybody in the media is there, and they will watch whatever you put on that stage for 4 days straight, which is anybody who's been to these events knows is like watching paint dry. Like, there's not that amount of content that can go up on there. It's not like every once in a while they got a band or something that plays. I saw Boys to Men once. That was nice in Philadelphia in 2016. But other than that, this is not.
I forgot about that. Yeah, that's right. That was
Motown Philly, right?
Yeah, that was the Democratic Unity Conference because all the Sanders people staged a walkout.
They did. Yeah, no, that was, and then we were in a tent because I was with BitTorrent News. BitTorrent very briefly wanted to be a news network, and so I'm in this like auxiliary tent with all the other off-brand media people. And the Sanders people decide to protest in there, and I'm like, trust me.
Oh my God, I remember that.
Yeah,
I remember walking out with like following them out of the convention hall, and out into the heat, and I was like, God damn, it's hot out here.
It's
so
muggy,
hot.
muggy.
Yes, it was. It was very. The East Coast is very swampy.
It does.
In the middle of summer.
Especially when you start to get those first rains, like ugh. God.
Oh, yeah, man.
All right. So yeah, like I can understand the idea from Trump's perspective. Let's make a night that America has to watch. Everybody is going to have to watch. If you're the VP, you are terrified because you want to be able to prepare yourself to anchor the convention with the biggest speech of your life. You're never going to give, unless you become the president, unless you become a former president, you're not going to get this spot ever again. That this is the only time that it happens. You get to, and oftentimes introduce yourself to the world because you're going to have a higher stature. So it is absolutely nerve-wracking for any of these people to not be able to know that I'm about to give the biggest speech of my entire life. And knowing Trump, he's going to want to do it where he announces the name out of an envelope and then they have to just walk up and give their speech. So you're going to have 5 people who have written a speech pretending like they're the vice president.
Do you remember Pence's speech in 2016 at the convention?
No, nothing pops out. The stuff that I remember the most, because going back to why I was hired by the erstwhile BitTorrent News, they just needed somebody that was used to being on stream for a long time that could just be. I was just the dude. I was just a one-man person narrating it. So mostly what I remember, especially as we got late into, because I was there from the gavel, like right up until the very, very end. So those Pence nights, which that's 3 or 4, I was absolutely wiped. So please remind me.
It's a trick question because nobody remembers. And it's because, to your point here, the focus was not about him.
No.
What was the focus that night? The focus was Ted Cruz saying, vote your conscience.
There we go.
Doing the walk-on like a WWF.
Yeah.
Out into the convention hall. He upstaged his own candidate.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of dynamics here heading into this. Number one, he needs a splash. Trump needs a splash. Why? More than any other time. So what? The convention starts on July 15th, which is a Monday. God, it's only 4 weeks from now.
I know. I got to book my flights.
Right. And Milwaukee's a bear to fly in and out of. It sucks.
I know. I might just wind up going to Chicago. Anyway, go ahead.
I did that once. I did that on a return trip. Just drove down to O'Hare.
Just rent the car. Yeah.
Yeah. It was a lot easier. I was going to have to stay around for an extra 24 hours or something. Trump is getting sentenced July 11th.
Okay.
1 week before he accepts the nomination, July 18th.
Yeah.
The day before, traditionally, July 17th, is when you announce the VP, the running mate.
Yeah.
He needs a splash because we're going to be talking about, I probably need to work on it this week, frankly, prep a story about the different options of what happens in Trump sentencing, a former president being sentenced. He needs that splash. And he does have the option now of building up to that moment and keeping everybody in suspense. If you recall, I think it was last week. He kind of hinted. He's like, "Oh, maybe I'd like Glenn Youngkin." He was like, "Sure, why not?" So he still keeps
throw him into the mix. Yeah, well, we've gotten the best guide as we kind of segue here into our power poll. We've seen a lot more of the drumbeat that some people have gotten vetting paperwork. Some people have not gotten vetting paperwork. The New York Times is told there are tiers to this, and that nobody's out of it, but there are definitely some people that are more in the center of everything. And so, Tom, I'm going to give you the first pick. Who is your number one VP Trump choice?
Ben Carson.
Wow, you are sticking with Ben Carson.
I'm still with him. He's got a good inside track. He's non-threatening to Trump.
Yeah.
Remember, it's a vote of exactly one.
One man. One man gets to choose.
This is something, when I was starting out in political reporting, I used to make this mistake all the time, and it took me a couple of years to really get over it. And it's something that we all do kind of naturally, which is we apply our own heuristics to things.
Yeah.
We look at things, and when you're bathed in the campaigning mechanics, and you think about a lot of traditional things like, does this add votes? Does this take away votes? Does this soften an image? Does it balance the ticket? Does it add money? Which is something that they've been thinking about a lot this time. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the psychology and the choices of the candidate. And Carson is so unassuming. He is the most unthreatening person in Trump's orbit that you could possibly think of, and he's very close with Eric and Laura Trump, which is an important dynamic in with the family. This is a big. By the way, I would also note too, when you look at the different candidates who are being talked about, Tim Scott, J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio. They're all being pushed by different power centers in Trump's world. Vance, of course, is a Trump Jr. and Steve Bannon guy. He comes from that world. They're very synced up. Rubio is kind of like more like a lot of the people really that used to be with Pence, like the Kellyanne Conways, like the movement conservatives, a lot of social conservatives. And Tim Scott is a Susie Wiles person. That's the kind of like the official inside track. But of course, we've been covering Trump for a while now. Nobody really tells Trump what to do.
Nobody. No.
And
You make your argument, and then whatever comes out of the dice chute is just what comes out of the dice chute, and everybody's going to get on board immediately, and that's going to be even more so now because unlike 2016 and unlike 2020, things are pretty much, if you look at the gauges. Aside from, and maybe even in spite of the 34 convictions, everything's in the green. Money's in the green now. Polls are in the green. He's shaking hands with Mitch McConnell and saying, hey, Larry Hogan, sure, I know my campaign. They got real mad, but I hope he wins. I really like to work with him. Like, it is about as rosy as it can be in a way that it never was in 2016 and it never was in 2020. We are moving into the convention phase without a fired campaign manager, without a gigantic, super self-made issue. All the stuff that's hit him are things that, yes, you can say are Donald Trump's behavior that eventually caused it, but it wasn't the campaign. It wasn't the campaign making a gigantic mistake. It wasn't them renting an arena that was too big in Tulsa. It's not them goon-handing Breitbart reporters that you are also, involved with. That, there's a lot of things that was self-destructive on the campaign side that doesn't exist now.
Yes,
and so now this just kind of feels, dare I say, like every other VP search where there's a bunch of people that are jockeying for their person, and we're going to see who eventually comes out on top. You say Ben Carson.
I'm sticking with Carson.
This has been your thing, and I'm going to respect that. I'm going to respect it because if and when it happens, you deserve all of the credit. I'm going to go a little bit more chalk. Right now, the favorite on Predict It, which I don't believe that prediction models are anything great, but I do think that they are a collection of current wisdom. I think that Doug Burgum is somebody that has a real shot at this for the following reasons. Number one, he looks like an old school Republican guy. Trump loves central casting. And if he has looked at the Nikki Haley stuff and he says, all right, that's the biggest thing that I need to do is just make sure that I put together the rest of that 47% that normally votes Republican. They might not love Doug Burgum, but if they actually listen to him talk, they are going to love Doug Burgum. He is a old world Reagan, Bush, conservative in what he talks about. And then he ticks the other Trump boxes. Self-made guy. He's rich. Donald Trump just if you are that, you are just a cut above for Trump. He just feels that you have come out of the cornfields of people that he likes, rich dudes who have built businesses. He just likes them better than people who have not.
Yep.
So there we go. I would say Doug Burgum, and I'm going to give him a little credit here because he tore his Achilles and then debated for 2 hours without painkillers. So that's no matter what. I will give Doug Burgum my pick here at number 2.
He has an X factor here. You know, we in traditional running mates, we talk about things like gender balance, age balance, regional balance, ethnicity balance. To a degree, ideological. I mean, that's why George H.W. Bush picked Dan Quayle. It was age and ideology inside the party. He's got another one going for him. Hair.
Big hair, dude. He's got some salad, dude. He's got a flow.
Yep. It's my kid's young, and she's talking about differences between boys and girls, and almost like most girls are long hair, and she's in that stage where she's like, why do they like it long? And I was like, oh no, girls like long hair. A lot of boys are short hair. It's not always the case.
Yeah,
these are generalities. And now instantaneously, I have to use Doug Burgum as the exception to the rule. Long, flowing locks.
Yeah, flowing locks. All right. Well, Ben Carson's been your number one since the first time that we talked to you. You have established you are the owner of Ben Carson Corner in the media world for this VP conversation. So we respect that, but he's now off the board. Who is your next pick?
Okay, so if it's not Carson, I think that you still need to look at Nikki Haley. I'm not sure that she would want to do it. I saw some reports that she, quote unquote, had endorsed Trump. Well, she has not endorsed Trump. She said she'll vote for him.
She's saying which that's slicing it a little thin to say it's not an endorsement.
Well, look at what happened.
What does she have to do? Say it in Latin and get it notarized?
She's from a different generation, and she's playing the parsing game. And look at this. If you have not, if that was an endorsement, well, then what did she have to say after the conviction?
I didn't see her say anything after the conviction.
Exactly. Didn't say a thing.
But that's not her role. She did what she needed to do. She did what she needed to do, and she got out of there. But then why would you put her third? Because she hasn't done the dance.
No. Well, number one, Trump does. If you talk to Trump folks over the years, they'll always tell you Trump appreciates strong women.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's a strong move. That's not acquiescing. It's she's and from a mechanic standpoint, she's still your best option at winning back those reticent Republican voters that you need to carry it over the line. I mean, this was a lot of the push with Pence in 2016, and
yes.
It worked.
But that was a different time where there were evangelicals that just didn't trust Trump, and with Pence on the ticket, they trusted him more. Now, were they ever going to vote for Hillary Clinton? No. Absolutely not. Would they have stayed home? Who knows? And that election turned on so few people that you could make an argument that it did have a measurable effect.
Haley is something I think that they would want, but I'm not sure she would take it, because there is this group of the Republican Party that sees their own futures in 2028. And certainly you hear a lot of people talking about, maybe her attacking for 28. I mean, certainly that is the subtext for a lot of this, the running mate stuff going on right now. I don't buy the Tim Scott stuff.
Well, hold on. Yeah, let's before we get to Tim Scott, let me give you mine. All right, I'll do it. I'll go JD Vance. For the reason, the inside game reason that you laid out before. He is very plugged in. Mm-hmm. One of the reasons why that you didn't mention about Nikki Haley, that is a little bit less of an issue than it was probably 3 months ago, when the financial ledgers of the Biden and Trump campaigns were looking way out of whack. Now they are looking far more at parity. And if you look at some of the momentum, the Biden campaign sent out a big press release, made sure everybody knew that they raised $30 million putting together a gigantic stage show in Los Angeles with Barack Obama, George Clooney, Julia Roberts, Jack Black, and of course Joe Biden and Jimmy Kimmel. Mm-hmm. The Trump campaign raised that plus $4 million in like 8 hours after the conviction. So it was $30 million doing one, and they got to pay out everything for that production. $34 million for sitting on your butt. That all came in, out of the sky. So right now the money is not the same problem that it was, but you'd always want more rather than less. Nikki Haley was always a big reason to bring her on, is the money, because there are donors that will donate to her that will not donate to Donald Trump. But JD Vance, one power player for which you didn't mention that he's aligned with, is part of the reason why he is a senator, and that's Peter Thiel, somebody that has drifted from the Trump orbit, but now there's nothing like winning that makes everybody forget all the reason why they didn't like each other before, and all these sunny poll numbers. Now you're seeing a lot of people drift back into the fold. JD Vance being the vice president, I think that's a very Thiel friendly pick.
Yes, absolutely.
And at that point now you're kind of, we've never seen a world where Donald Trump wants to think of himself out of the picture. But if he's running for his second term, limited term, and we're putting aside the idea that he just suspends the concept of term limits, but like, he has to start thinking of, well, who's my H.W. Bush? Who's my John Major? Who's my person that runs afterward? And maybe I just sit back and I pick amongst whoever's, doing a good job in the primary 4 years from now. But if JD Vance is that dude, if he's your vice presidential pick, I think inherent in that is you believing he's going to have the inside track. He's going to be the guy who comes out of this administration with the best shot. And if he fumbles it, then he fumbles it. But, out of the chute, a dude that young, there's no argument.
There's something else that he does, which is what Trump needs, and he does it better than a lot of the other running mate candidates. Is he Trump-splains things? He's like, well, when he said bloodbath, this is what he was really referring to. It's and Pence. I mean, obviously, Pence used to do a lot of this. Cleanup. I don't know, folks, and I think Tim Scott is not forceful enough, and is for what he's supposed to be doing there, but he still has a lot of support internally. And I know the Stefanik stuff. Stefanik kind of comes out of Devin Nunes' world. Garrett period, that's more like the I don't know what you call that. It's California Republicans, even though she's a New Yorker. And that's age and gender balance. But you can't, and this is an important dynamic. I mean, because again, go back to this. It's one person's psychology.
Yeah.
And Trump doesn't like being upstaged.
Yeah.
And now Vance has done a very good job of explaining things without yanking away the spotlight from him.
Yeah.
But he could also be viewed as a threat for his ability to do Trump better than Trump does Trump. And remember that about a year or two ago, that was the big argument with DeSantis, is that this guy was going to be
Trump without Trump.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And even though he was really more like Cruz with extra Cruz baggage. And because of the way he talked about things, anti-woke and a lot of the social issues, he wasn't really a nationalist populist in the way that Trump is, and certainly not in the way he behaved publicly.
Yeah.
Vance has more of that. Vance checks off that box. And he could conceivably, this is a big part of the argument, could conceivably carry forward the MAGA movement on the right, if and when Trump steps out of the picture. But that question of, and this is, and again, this is why I'm really fixated on Carson here, because I would argue wrongly, as most normal people would argue wrongly, Trump felt burned by Mike Pence on January 6th.
Yeah.
Even though it was the rioters coming within 40 feet of Pence and his family at the Capitol, not coming within 40 feet of Donald Trump and his overdone steak at the White House.
Yeah.
Okay. But again, that's not, as reporters, as journalists, as people who observe this stuff, it's not for us to say what is or should not be. It's for us to observe the dynamics. And the dynamics here are the psychology of one person. It's Trump. And Trump he felt threatened by Pence. He felt like he was betrayed by him. I think it's probably safe to say Pence feels the same way, given everything that happened. And Carson is uniquely non-threatening. He doesn't have a political future after this. Vance does have a political future.
He would have a big political. I mean, again, the argument for Vance is, you want to know who else was a 2-year senator who served as second fiddle to an iconoclastic president that's remembered fondly for decades and decades? Richard Nixon to Dwight D. Eisenhower in 1952. Settled that. Everybody likes Ike. You tell Donald Trump he's Eisenhower, I'm Nixon. I'll just be behind the scenes. I'm gonna play backup. I know how the modern media world works. It looks like I have eyeliner on. I'm on television all the time, and he's able to execute in that path. All right, you have number 5. So you have already selected Ben Carson and Nikki Haley, 2 picks. Although I'm looking at this, Ben Carson is 4th on the predicted market right now, and I have taken the top 2. Marco Rubio still on the board. Tim Scott, Byron Donalds, Elise Stefanik, Glenn Youngkin, and then we get into Crazy Town here with everybody else who just has a name.
Rubio has a shot here, and I wrote a little bit about this on Twitter earlier. I've seen some reporting around this 12th Amendment stuff. Can they be from the same state? And the way that the mechanics of that is that the 12th Amendment bars electors from casting a vote for a president and a vice president if they are from the same state. So the fix is, which seems to be pretty easy. They ran a test on this with Cheney and Bush in 2000, because at the time they were both from Texas.
Yeah.
Yes. And so they just put Cheney back in Wyoming. Trump, it's easy enough to move because he is a Floridian and a New Yorker and a New Jerseyite. So
yeah. So do you think he'd move, or Marco would resettle in D.C. where he has a apartment?
It's easy enough. I don't see it as
one of them
barrier.
Yeah,
exactly.
So give me the pathway back for Marco Rubio to get to this level of the conversation, because while certainly Trump and Rubio have not been at odds really since the end of the primary in 2016. Rubio wanted to go work at the Miami Dolphins and then winds up coming back because they were at a danger of losing that Senate seat. Mm-hmm. So, but they've been pretty simpatico since then. Rubio didn't freak out after January 6th or anything like that, but it still surprises me that somebody like Rubio is at like this level, to the point where I've never really bought it. Why should I?
I mean, it's some of it's the national security hawks pushing him. It's the movement conservatives pushing him. I gotta tell you, I don't entirely get it myself. I mean, he drew blood in 2016, one of the few Republicans to really, actually, ironically enough, with the exception of Carson back in November of 2015, mm-hmm. By talking about Trump genitalia.
Yes.
And that moved poll numbers. And, Trump does not forget stuff like that. This is why you see the Oppo team starting to re-up. Ironically enough, right before Elon Musk started hiding likes on Twitter, they re-up all the times that Vance shit all over Trump.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah. It's, and there's plenty of examples.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was a huge part of his primary race in Ohio was how much was that journey. I think, look, if he could get through MAGA in Ohio, and he didn't have one of those super managed Glenn Youngkin, we'll just put him in the slot. He had to really fight, and it was a closer primary than I think some people thought it was going to be. But if he could get through that, I don't think anybody really, and he could get the Trump endorsement then. I don't think anybody really cares about it now.
Right. And I don't entirely understand the Rubio thing myself. I mean, the mechanics, I forgot to say this earlier, the mechanics of it is a play to Latinos, which is obviously, we've seen a lot of this, if you start, it's ironic to think about, we always talk about campaigns, like generals fighting the last war. We'd focus so much on the Rust Belt states, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan.
Which, by the way, would be the Vance thing, although he is not from any of the states that are really going to matter. Ohio's pretty solid red. He's certainly from a neighboring state that can bring an element of that story, especially when he gets into his hillbilly elegy, plight of the working class and the underclass tales.
Rubio plays to the states we had not paid as much attention to, but are starting to see as the bigger swing dynamic here in Nevada and Arizona, in your Latino vote down there. So that's part of the thinking on. Now, I don't know how much any of them, I mean, if you look at the Tim Scott and the Ben Carson moving the black vote, hypothetically, versus do you put on a Stefanik or try to get a Haley for suburban women?
Yeah.
The same thing for Rubio. Does that work with Hispanic voters? I'm not really sure that any of that does. I mean, the thing that seems to work more than any of that is Trump touting all these UFC fights that he goes to. It's right, like he's been doing that for a long time.
Yeah.
Now he started advertising. And that seems to move numbers more than any kind of running mate you're gonna select. Certainly Rubio, but that is part of the argument. That's part of the stated argument for Rubio.
And not to be crown myself king of Spanish speaking American politics, but the Mexicans in Nevada and Arizona and New Mexico don't care about a Cuban. They don't. Now he'll speak Spanish. He'll show up to a rally. He'll do a rally in Spanish, and that's something. It's good, and I could see that. But this isn't a 1-for-1 play in the same way that I don't think that Tim Scott is going to walk in to Detroit or Milwaukee into an inner city neighborhood and say like, "Hey, everybody, we're all the same. Let's move as one." I don't think that's the case in any of this. Ben Carson weirdly is authentic in almost any situation he walks into because he's so odd that nobody would doubt that, like, if Ben Carson's here, then you're just going to experience the Ben Carson of it all. But the Marco Rubio Spanish thing, I get, and I get why Trump would get it. I get the idea that he would love to have a fiery Marco Rubio up on stage in Arizona, or late in the race. We haven't had a good poll in New Mexico, like in the last year. And that's one of the things that's bubbling up. I don't know if you saw the Ann Seltzer Iowa poll that came out today. We're recording this on Monday, but it's like Trump 51, Biden in the like low 30s. It is bad, which, look, Biden was never going to win Iowa, but if he's that underwater in Iowa borders Minnesota and Wisconsin, two states that absolutely Biden has to win. So we'll see. But in a world where, let's say you're trying to expand the map, you do see some of, like, you start to see New Mexico polls that look outlierish in the way that the Virginia polls look like, then maybe, Marco, you're in Santa Fe, you're in Phoenix, you're in Vegas. Congratulations, you're doing that, and you're speaking Spanish the entire time.
That's interesting. I saw one of these terrible forecasts. I hate the forecasts. I don't like them. I don't know why they're still around. It's they're all over. I'm stopping myself from cussing right now.
I love them. For the record, I love more forecasts. I feel like we should have more. I love that every sicko on Twitter has their own forecast now. I can't get enough of them. I just spreadsheet me to death. Just do nothing but just make more and more complicated spreadsheets that spit out fake numbers.
I would just like to let everybody know my official forecast, which is based heavily on data, so much data, all proprietary, and it's like just the sweetest AI you've never heard of, that's proprietary too. Is my forecast is that a chopper it hovers over the Pfizer Forum in Milwaukee, and drops down a rope.
Yep.
And Michelle Obama becomes the Republican nominee.
Oh, geez. Wow. What a forecast. What an amazing forecast. Now that would be something to see. All right, here we go. I'm going to go at number 6. No one's taken Tim Scott. I don't think that Tim Scott is going to be the nominee, but I do think he probably deserves to be in the top 5 because he has demonstrated a lot of things that are rare in the Trump orbit. He knifed Nikki Haley, somebody for whom he owes his political career, in her home state. He has been more electric as a surrogate than he was as a candidate. And he seems like he desperately would like to rebrand himself going forward, be he a vice presidential pick or somebody else, as a MAGA-friendly Republican in a way that when he ran this time, he obviously had to put himself apart from MAGA because he's running against Donald Trump, but he very much was an evangelical, more movement conservative. I think we've seen that that's a dying breed. He wants to be a part of it, and he wants to go to barrel forward. I don't think he's going to be it because A, I don't think that Trump's going to pick him, and B, I just think, look, we're about to go to a big leadership change in the Senate. He feels like a natural long-term senator to me. The best place for him would probably just ride this out. He's never going to lose a race in South Carolina for the rest of his life. Yeah. He can be a lion in the Senate.
Yeah. I don't think, Trump's, he has these bursts of attention like love bombing for people. And, God knows that Tim Scott was right at the top of the list going into New Hampshire and coming out of New Hampshire.
Yeah.
I mean, right to the point that we found out he had a girlfriend and even got engaged to her.
And he's engaged. I wonder how it's going. Have they picked out the what the menu's going to be? I don't know. Someone needs to ask him.
It depends upon whether you're honeymooning in Milwaukee or Charleston.
Oh my God, imagine. Look, you want must-see TV. Tim Scott gets married live on stage at the Fiserv Arena in Milwaukee.
As the running mate to Michelle Obama. Some of these guys, and I don't really think that Scott has a future in this Republican Party, and I don't really think that
you don't.
Does either. No, I don't. Because they don't speak to. They're from that generation. There was that great Michael Cruz piece about Haley and Scott, and I'm blanking on the other one. Coming out of South Carolina in 2016. It might have been Rubio about that generation of like new Republicans, but that was new Republicans 8 years ago.
Yeah,
and that's not. He himself has not fundamentally changed, and the other part of Scott too is that it's a big part of the reason that he got on board so easily with Trump. He never got traction with evangelicals when he was in Iowa. That did not translate.
Well, nobody did.
Well, right, exactly. Scott and Pence and God, what's his name?
Asa Hutchinson.
Asa, yes, Asa. No, Asa didn't have a lot of play with. Never had any pool with evangelicals, but Pence and Scott, and the Bob Vander Plaats of the world saying like, okay, yeah, evangelicals are going to vote a different way. It never happened. So I don't see where you pick up a new demographic coming out of this. I agree with your Lion of the Senate. Stay there as long as you like.
Yeah.
I just don't. Yeah, I don't see the future for him and for Haley, for that matter, too. I'm not sure.
I would agree. I think that she's a woman without a country, and we are. We'll see where this election goes, but right now, based on my proprietary forecasting, there's a few. There's a few scenarios where, let's say, some of these trends that are good for Trump and bad for Biden right now continue, where the Never Trump movement is over, done. Mm-hmm. Like, you are now a fringe of a fringe if you are considering yourself a Republican that doesn't like Donald Trump, because he will have
not in the Republican Party. They're no longer a part of the Republican Party. Some of them are part of the Democratic Party.
Some, yep.
But really more just, on an island alone.
Yeah. They're just going to be, it's you're almost third party status, essentially, and that might be the path that it goes, is you just find an operation. You got a lot of really good hands, a lot of people that were mechanics in the world of politics that say, whatever. We'll start our own thing, and maybe we just screw the Republican Party for the rest of our lives. And
I mean, that's been the whole thing for going on 8 years now.
Yeah.
But I agree, it's not part of the Republican Party. Now the flip side of that, though, is that if Trump eats dirt in November and all these polls have just been way off again.
Yep.
If that happens, Trump will run again, and will continue to control a plurality of the party. But we'll have again this same argument that's been going on inside the Republican Party about winning after losing. It's been about a decade at this point, and that would create an opening for somebody who could be a fresh voice. DeSantis looked like that when he was just somebody on TV, and then he stepped out into reality and didn't look like that anymore.
Also, I think Trump spoke to the senatorial collection, the delegation there last week, and apparently said that Jeff Rowe is a surgeon on candidates' wallets, and he doesn't want anybody to work with Jeff Rowe again. And I got to say, I can't argue with the results. I mean, like, Ron DeSantis was running a better campaign before he actually started running a campaign. And then as soon as he stopped running his campaign, he was better everywhere. He was better speaking. He was better on social media. Whatever was happening in the middle there should be studied and dissected of how to ruin momentum of somebody of political persuasion. So here we go.
He never had it. You know what? He never built out, and this is fundamental campaign politics. He didn't have a team of loyalists because he never trusted anybody.
Yeah. Well, that's apparently part of it is that DeSantis is, had to learn some manners. I guess that was the word on the street is sometimes you got to send a birthday card, sometimes you got to. I heard I don't know how much I'm gonna have to disguise this a little bit, but I heard a rumor when I was in D.C. that there was an elected official from Florida that was in the DeSantis orbit. They were all it was good at that time to be a Republican in Florida. Everything was great. People were winning up and down the ticket, and had an accident. Was waiting some kind of phone call from his boy Ron DeSantis. Nothing. We got 2 phone calls and a get well card from?
Yeah.
Donald John Trump.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
And it's like, so you look at that and then you see the stories of, all these DeSantis commits flip en masse, like 13 or 14 of them flip en masse. And you got to figure some of it's obviously Susie Wiles, who's plugged into Florida politics, knows Ron DeSantis probably better than he knows himself. But it's also Trump. Trump's that dude. He's a schmoozer. He remembers birthdays. He remembers your kids' names. Like that's how he operated in New York. It's how he operates now.
Yeah, his retail. That stuff matters. As much as things seem to have changed, they really haven't.
All right, here you got 2 more. You got 2 more picks here. And I have 2 more picks. So let's get a little fringy here. You're at 7. For our power poll. Who do you like here on the fringe? I'm going to give you some names. Byron Donalds is still on the board. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, Elise Stefanik, Glenn Youngkin, Vivek, Tulsi.
No. Ooh, Tulsi's an interesting one.
And then, there's some that, Kirsty Noem, huh?
Still in it. Shooting dogs turns off most people.
Who do you got at 7?
You unshoot the dog? Shoot the ghostwriter.
Yeah.
The ghostwriter was a puppy. Come on.
Well, no, apparently, did you see the thing that she wanted to put it in her first book and she got talked out of it?
Exactly.
It's like, what are you, why do you think, God bless everybody who runs these campaigns that has to keep some of these things behind the scenes. But I can't imagine just a wild-eyed Kristi Noem saying, there's this great story where I shot this dog. Like, it really tells you what it's really like to live on the frontier.
It's like I got all this
one rule in Hollywood screenwriting.
Turns out our whole party is nothing but cat people, okay? So here's the thing about me shooting a dog.
At least lie and say the dog bit your kid. If the dog bites the kid, you got to shoot it. The dog doesn't have a lawyer. The dog's not going to sue you. It's dead.
No, I'm not entirely out of it. 99% is, if we're going fringe, that's fringe.
Okay.
Gabbard has that, the extremist wing, what used to be the Tucker Carlson wing. And I don't know what area Carlson occupies anymore, but you certainly see that with like the Roger Stone types of the world. That side of the party. So she has a base, and she's young, and she leans into it. She has a lot of that crossover RFK Jr. Vote out there.
Do you think she speaks at the convention, Tulsi?
Yeah.
She feels like opening act on one of the bigger days, like that Michael Bloomberg at the RNC back with like McCain or something like that.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of the stuff about, well, geez, I mean, what's his name? RFK Jr. said that they reached out to him to, potentially be a running mate, and he shot him down. I mean, RFK Jr. would have been a good option as well, because again, it brings in, he eats into, it's still kind of unclear exactly who he eats into more in terms of Biden or Trump. But if you're looking at that dynamic and from sheer mechanics, then yes, absolutely. Why would you not bring him into the Republican fold? And I've heard some of the arguments about, he used to be a Democrat. Gabbard used to be a Democrat. This is how, for some reason that this is uncouth to all of the lifelong Republicans over at the Republican National Committee. I don't buy that. I don't buy that.
Look, if that's your argument, then 1988 called. They want their norms back. Like that we're beyond that. We're beyond the take a ticket in line when you're in college and eventually you'll get called to some position of power within the Republican infrastructure. That is dead. Everything goes through the warlord. If the warlord likes what you say on TV, then you're going to get a spot when he starts booking his television show. That's pretty much it. All right, so if we have Tulsi Gabbard at 7, I'm going to put Elise Stefanik at 8. Only because I feel like this is the position where, because and you know this better than most, some of these names are here because they're real. Mm-hmm. Some of these names are here because it's the thank you for being loyal, for being on the team. Because now, no matter what, any bio about you will always mention that you were thought about for this role. And so they're going to float out a bunch of names, and some of them are real. Some of them are, thank you for doing this. You are, just know that we think you're special. Elise Stefanik, I feel like, is in that sphere.
Yes. I think, what's funny about this, and it's so funny to think about the people who we are not talking about, who used to be floated more often. I mean, boy, talk about like an ephemeral float. Tom Cotton, in Arkansas. That lasted exactly 20 seconds, and it's gone now.
Yeah.
Similarly, I think you have to look at Vivek Ramaswamy, because he was somebody who had a lot of that buzz, but was always viewed as a threat inside a Trump world. And again, to that key dynamic of not upstaging Trump. You cannot upstage Trump. And if you are going to be a Republican running mate, this is like a key requirement. And that's why you see these stories about he'll be in the cabinet somewhere. Maybe they'll ship him off as an ambassador to something or other. But certainly not for a running mate, even though he was being talked about earlier in the year. But that died off pretty fast.
He always seemed, look, I think Trump's going to want him on television. He's going to want him on podcasts, probably more podcasts than television. Yes. Because that's his natural environment. Is he'll pontificate, and he's able to talk crypto in a way that the rest of these folks would not know Ethereum from a hole in the wall. So like there's an element where Vivek can speak to the audience. All right, your last pick here. Who is your number 9 on our first ever power poll for vice presidential selections? Glenn Youngkin still on the board. Byron Donalds on the board.
I like Donalds. Donalds is a play for
he is a guy that can walk into Detroit, who walked into the Bronx, who walked. He can walk into these black neighborhoods and say, there's a new way forward. Here's why I'm going to sell MAGA to you in a way that Tim Scott would feel. Important. Yeah.
Tim Scott was working too hard at it when he made this the podcast of like 5 black voices on the right. Okay.
Yeah.
And like that was too much. Okay. And you can't do somebody like Candace Owens because she's like, it's for a multitude of reasons that don't even get at the Hitler comments. Okay. Everything since then. But Donalds comes at it naturally and is very press friendly. Is very chatty around the Capitol. But I think he's more of a candidate for governor of Florida right now. Yeah, I like Donalds is a good one. He's caught Trump's attention naturally. It's funny how much you hear about him. But not one of his big opponents down there for governor, Matt Gaetz.
Matt Gaetz.
Never been floated.
Never been floated.
Super fascinating.
Yeah. Now that's an interesting one that we have not really talked about Matt Gaetz at all in this process. Nobody has worked harder for Trump than Matt Gaetz. Nobody has been more devoted than Matt Gaetz. And yet, I don't know. Is it just that he's got the Florida governor's mansion in his sights and he's like, this is where I go?
He does, but remember this. I remember in November of 22, I was over at the Capitol when they were having that knockdown drag-out battle inside the Republican conference for who would be the next speaker. So it's after they know that they're going to win back the House. And it was when Trump launched for president.
Yeah.
Exactly one member of Congress showed up to that campaign launch.
Mm-hmm.
You remember who?
No.
Madison Cawthorn.
Wow.
And I was sitting in the House side of the Capitol Visitor Center. And I remember I was like around 4 o'clock, and I think the launch was like 9 o'clock at night, something like that. And, of course, Cawthorn's in a wheelchair, and he's rolling through the visitor center, going wherever he's going to go. Earlier in the day, one of the AP reporters had caught Matt Gaetz.
Yeah.
Who is from Florida, does Florida connections through and through, and said, "Hey, will you be at Trump's campaign launch in a few hours?" And he's like, "No, I got too much to do here at the Capitol.
Yeah,
I got too much going on here at the Capitol." So Matt Gaetz, who had every reason to be there, couldn't make it because he just had too much going on. But Madison Cawthorn was absolutely able to make it down there and was the only member of Congress that was there for the campaign launch.
For then, right? Because he was very shortly out of Congress by way of a primary challenge.
The overlapping circle here.
All right, we're going to bring it on home. My 10th pick, I don't think it's going to happen, but I'll paint the picture. It is Glenn Youngkin for the following reason. Number one, of course, Virginia, you cannot run in consecutive terms for governor. Right. I think he has done whatever he's going to do in Virginia. So he is looking for something else. It's usually, governor to senator pipeline is very strong in Virginia. But let's say, internally, you're looking at those Virginia polling numbers, which have been outliery, but interesting. If you're like, wait, if we can take Virginia off the board, this is a wrap. We're done. We can play. Yeah. We're going to do whatever we're going to do in the Rust Belt anyway. We think we're going to win. But if Glenn Youngkin's the VP, that's the most traditional. We're going to try and win a state by a vice presidential selection pick that you could possibly do. But if internally they believe they're at that kind of 50-50 toss-up status in Virginia right now, it would be more strategic than we've talked about. We have, and I think it is reflective of the actual state of the conversation that we have not gotten to that. But Youngkin would be the argument for it.
And he met with him when he was down here last week. Mm-hmm. That is, boy, you're flipping me into a Youngkin guy now. Yeah.
Well, we'll see. We'll see, because now this is our official, as of the publishing of this podcast, June 19th, our official power poll. Number 1, Ben Carson. We're riding the hot hand. Tom's been on this. We stay with it. Ben Carson's number 1. Doug Burgum, 2. Nikki Haley, 3. J.D. Vance, 4. Marco Rubio, 5. Tim Scott, 6. Tulsi Gabbard at 7. Elise Stefanik at 8. Byron Donalds at 9. And Glenn Youngkin at 10. Ooh, there we go. That official PX3 with Tom LoBianco power poll.
Yeah.
Tom, where can people find your work?
Oh, check us out over at 24site.news. That's the number 24SIGHT.news. We're on Substack. We have a 24site podcast, and we are expanding into additional platforms as we continue growing. 24site News, and we'll be up in Milwaukee in a couple of weeks. So
there we go.
We're on the ground. Come find us. Bring us cheese and beer.
I'll see you. Yeah.
Provisions will be greatly appreciated.
What's the beer? There's the beer in Milwaukee that's only in Milwaukee, and you can't leave state lines with it.
The cow.
Something cow, spotted cow or something like that. I got absolutely trashed at a wedding once on that. All right. Thank you very, very much, Tom. Greatly appreciated. Everybody read 24 Site. We will. We'll see you down the road. We will have to update this before the convention, so we'll see you soon.
Yes. Awesome. Thanks, Justin.
That'll wrap it up for us today. Politics, written and hosted by me, Justin Robert Young, for Dog and Pony Show Audio here in Austin, Texas. Getting a little hot, huh? Heat dome action. Everybody stay inside. Hydrate. Make sure you hydrate. You want to know what I do every morning? I wake up 5:30 every single morning. And before I go to the gym, I chug 2 pints of water. Because what's the point of learning how to chug if you're not going to do it for health? Do you ever think of that? TheYoungAmerican@gmail.com is where you need to go if you want to send a email for feedback to this show. Of course, you can find and share video clips of this show. Justin R. Young on TikTok, Justin R. Young on Instagram, Justin R. Young on Twitter. But the big thing is YouTube. YouTube.com/politics. Starting to get a little traction here. Starting to get a little some newbies that are being fed via this great, powerful algorithm that everybody has told me so much about. And so, I would like to ask you this question. If you are seeing this show for the first time on YouTube, what is your first impression of the Politics show? And if you are a longtime listener or viewer, I want to ask you what your first impression of the PX3 show is. And I think we're going to get a variety of answers, because the show, like anything that's been on the air for a long time, has evolved, so to speak. If you want to share the podcast with your friends, family, and clergy, it is px3podcast.com. Of course, you can support us with a one-time donation. PayPal.me/PayJury. Venmo is Justin-Young-20. Cash App is PX3Cash. And you can send me anything you'd like in the mail. P.O. Box 153184, Austin, Texas 78715. As we mentioned before, the only place to get our bonus content is at TakePoliticsSeriously.com. Our $3 tier gets you 2 bonus podcasts per week, covering all the news that we miss on our free podcasting schedule. But it is our $10 tier that gets you your name read at the end of the show, like these fine folks, in the Titanic $10 tier, including Fat Tony's PJs from New York, Devon, the CFP, Gloria, my mom, Gray Zone Peapod, Jay, Sugar Brady, Marcus with a Q. DP4 Bongo, Sam, John, Niemeister, Edwin, Evoke Gloria Young for King of the New World Order. Edison, Jeremy, a dog named Checker. Sarah Jeannie, Matthew, Dr. G, Neil, His Nerdiness Charles, Audrey Stoll Adler's Spot, Darren, Idris Arslanian, Bluefront, and the Lenina, Berkeley Stephen, Chad, Zombie Duck, Matt, Chill, Adam, Chief Andy, Robert, Casey, Paul, Dustin, Brad, D. Laser, Nick, Just Another Pilot, Middle-Aged Mike, Utah, Jimmy Montana, The Jen, Alo, D. Reilly, Craig, Andrew. If you want your name right at the end of the show, one place to do it. Take politics seriously.com. It is my honor and distinct pleasure that on the next episode of PX3 on the free feed on Friday, we will feature an interview with a presidential ticket that will have nationwide ballot access. Chase Oliver, Matt Termet, mistake, Chase Oliver, Mike Termet, the Libertarian ticket, both of them on the show on Friday, in which I asked them whether or not they agree with me that their party hosting Donald Trump at their convention was an act of political cuckoldry. Yeah. It's a good chat. I think you guys are going to like it. But that's Friday. Till then, this is your old pal Justin Robert Young saying, some shows talk about politics, others talk about politics, still more discuss politics, but this is the only show that dares discuss. Oh, 3.